We did not do that so far this year because we could not get bipartisan support to do a borrowing plan to allow us to make those pension payments. I think that's very important. If we don't make those pension payments, the retirement systems are forced to sell off assets, and that's the wrong thing to be doing. And we need to pass that pension borrowing to allow our pension systems to maintain their solvency. Thank you.
Their question is, why was the union not allowed to be part of the negotiations?
Yeah, I certainly was not happy with the way in which the pension reform bill came to us for a vote. There had been discussions and negotiations going on, as Representative Gordon alluded to, and I think there was a serious lack of communication on the part of the leadership in the House and the Senate with the parties who had been a part of those negotiations. I think there was some progress being made. These issues have been on the table for a couple of years, and actually there were many more harmful proposals that actually had been proposed the previous year. But the truth of the matter, the fact of the matter is, the legislation passed nearly unanimously, and the issues that were addressed in the legislation had to be addressed and have helped us realize a savings in the short term, and will help us realize an even greater savings in the long term. But it's not the way I would like to see business done. It's not the way that I operate on legislation that I sponsor, and I regret the way in which the bill was rushed to us and the lack of communication that existed around it, but it was the right legislation for us at the right time.
We're going to move on to education. And this is the question: what are your views on the manner in which Illinois funds public education? What changes would you support to assure that all Illinois students have adequate resources to receive a fair and equitable education? Do you support any specific legislation or proposals to this end?
Well, education is going to be one of my top priorities. And imagine, if you will, just for a minute, your place of employment. On payday, your boss comes to you and says, we know it's payday, and we know we owe you this check, but we're not going to be able to give it to you today. We'll get it to you sometime. We don't know when, but just keep working hard, and we'll get you your pay at some point when it comes. Imagine what that would do to your household budget. Imagine how you would have to alter your lives. That's exactly what's happening in education right now. The schools do not know when they're going to get their next check. They're running on a budget that they passed a budget, they did their due diligence, they're obligated to receive the funds from the state, and those funds aren't coming in from the state. They don't know when they're going to receive their next check. So the first thing that we need to do is pay the schools what's already been obligated to them. We have to get them caught up so that they can properly operate their budgets that they have passed. So that's first and foremost. The other thing is something we talked about earlier, and that's prioritization. We have to be able to prioritize. Again, I mentioned earlier the budget constraints we had in East Peoria. What we have to do first, we all have a pool of money to choose to pull from. We have to prioritize that. Education is going to be one of my top priorities. I will want to see education at a high priority. So again, catch up the schools and then prioritize education funding moving forward. Thank you.
Education is my top priority. I'm very honored to serve as chairman of the Education Committee in the House and spend a great deal of my time on education issues. Clearly, the problem with funding for education is the way in which we fund education, and I have been saying that throughout my tenure in the legislature, and we need to move away from our over-reliance on the property tax to a more equitable means of funding. I truly believe that if we would properly fund education, we would erase many of the other issues that we see plaguing our schools. The state funds public schools to about a 33% level, and our Constitution says the state should have the primary responsibility for funding education. In most people's minds, that's 50% or greater. We have had an opportunity to do this in the past. I voted for the Edgar Plan in 1997 that actually would have shifted education funding, a part of education funding, off of the property tax and onto an income tax increase. It passed the House. The Senate president at the time decided that he didn't like the bill and didn't call it for a vote. I think if he had, it would have passed, and I oftentimes wonder what condition we would be in today, now 13 years later, if it had passed. This has got to be a part of our fiscal reform. We've got to provide more revenue at the state level for education and reduce local property taxes. As far as reforming education, I think we have taken some significant steps in reforming education, but I'm a big believer that our educators, our teachers in the classroom, know how to do their job, and they know how to do it well. If we give them the adequate resources, they will give us a great product. Thank you.
We have another education question, very specific. Should be able to answer quickly, I think. Maybe not. It's an important question. How important is it to provide preschool and early childhood education?
Well, I wholeheartedly agree with that. Early childhood education is very, very important to me, and we have to maintain a good level of early childhood education. With 4 young kids at home with us, we see the value of reading, and we've started reading programs in our household at very, very early on ages. So early childhood education is critical. The other thing that's critical is parental involvement. Parental involvement with your child's life from the very beginning is very key to helping them go through the up levels of grade school that you start at a very young age, and help them grow with the curriculum that they have coming to them at each age. So I agree.
I guess you won't hear any disagreement among us on this. Early childhood is one of the areas, as Representative Gordon said, that we have excelled in the state of Illinois. Up until this year, with the budget crises, we have provided additional funds, significant new funding for early childhood education and development. And it is so vital. All you have to do is visit the Valeska Hinton Center if you haven't, here in Peoria. I did that early in my career and was so excited about what I saw and about the enthusiasm of the teachers, and Ken Hinton was the principal at that time, and really sparked an interest in me, and I think it played a part in frankly my desire to spend most of my legislative career working on education issues. We can make a difference if we start young, and the scientific data that is available on how we learn, how the brain grows from birth to 3, and the difference that can make for those young people as they enter regular school age years, and then beyond, the problems that we can help prevent for society in terms of juvenile delinquency, in terms of the expenses for public safety and for corrections are phenomenal. So we have been a leader in this. We need to continue to be a leader in this, but we have to make sure that we have the funding to do that, and we can't do that without additional revenue. We can't do that with a 10% across the board cut, as has been suggested. These are the types of programs that are so very important, and that's what's at stake when we talk about the budget and we talk about having to make budget cuts. That's why I support the need for additional revenue, so that we can continue funding and can continue being a leader in early childhood education and education as a whole.
Okay, we're going to move on to the subject of jobs, which is a very difficult problem nationally and statewide and locally. For all of you, can you say what you have done to bring jobs to the area? And if you are elected, what jobs you will bring to the area if you are elected? What jobs do you think you will be able to accomplish that with?
Well, I agree that the state doesn't actually create jobs. Small businesses create jobs. And the best way for small businesses to do what they do best is to have the state get out of their way and let them do what they do best. A great example of this is what happened in a few years ago in the trucking industry. The state increased fees in the trucking industry. And we saw what happened when fees were raised. Tens of thousands of truck licenses were moved across our borders. Not to India, but to Indiana. Another example, another example of where we have to find ways, the state government has to find ways where we are restricting and preventing businesses from doing what they do best to grow jobs. Another example of this is the efforts to expand prevailing wage in the enterprise zone to private business. And I'm very thankful that Senator Kaler was not able to support the bill that my opponent sponsored that would have most certainly hurt private business that needed to expand and grow and create jobs in an enterprise zone. If passed, I know of at least one small business in the city of East Peoria that would have been forced to consider leaving East Peoria. That's not what we want. We don't want to push jobs out. We want to create jobs, because when we create jobs, we're increasing revenue. And we all heard from others that we need an increase in revenue. Well, that's the way to increase revenue. When you're able to increase revenue, you're able to have more money for the priorities we talked about, such as education. So I'm a big proponent of increasing revenue by creating jobs and bringing monies into the economy that are not there. Thank you.
Well, job growth obviously is key to our economic survival and growth and helping us through the recession. I think that we have passed some significant steps during this past year with the renewal of the manufacturer's purchase credit, as Representative Gordon said, and she really led the charge on that in the House. In addition, the research and development credit. We also created a small business job growth tax credit to help small businesses hire new people and get a financial incentive for that. On an individual basis, I was very pleased to lead the effort to reform or change the way we give a utility tax credit to Keystone. That simple change in the legislation allowed them to keep their doors open. Quite frankly, if we had not done that, I think we would have been looking at a shuttered plant and several hundred of jobs lost in the central Illinois area. So I was pleased to lead that charge. Also was pleased to play a part in the development that's taking place in Canton, in my hometown. As many of you know, Canton has suffered for a couple of decades economically. But we're finally beginning to see a turnaround thanks to perseverance, and the state played a significant part in the environmental cleanups that have taken place at the old International Harvester site and now the Cook Medical development that is there. I was also very excited to be able to fast track some of the state assistance, and we're seeing real positive benefits there. So economic and development, job growth takes perseverance. It takes a partnership between the state and local government, cities and counties. And I believe my job as state representative is to be that liaison between those levels of government and make sure that that the state is doing everything possible to help our area grow.